Welcome, National Economics University students. Let's dive right into this explainer on the crucial economics behind sustainable agriculture. We're going to be drawing heavily from Tietenberg and Lewis's renowned work on environmental and natural resource economics. Whether you are studying agribusiness, environmental policy, or general economics, mastering these concepts is absolutely vital for the future of Vietnam's development. Let's get into it. Here is our roadmap for today. We're going to start with the green dilemma, unpack market failures, and look at how we actually value nature's services. Then we'll tackle climate change, explore the sustainable shift, and wrap up with some key lessons for you as future leaders.
All right, part one, the green dilemma, high yields, hidden costs.
Think about what's happening right in our own backyard, like down in the Mekong Delta. We really have to ask ourselves, if nature gives us water and soil for free, why on earth are we facing such severe water scarcity and soil degradation just to produce high-yield rice? We rely on the earth for our absolute most vital crops, yet our intensive farming methods are kind of systematically destroying the very foundation they depend on. It's a massive paradox.
This dynamic perfectly highlights the intense tension between securing our food supply and the rapid buildup of environmental debt. On one hand, yes, we have this massive volume of rice exported globally. Huge success, right? But on the other hand, look at the hidden costs. We're talking immense greenhouse gas emissions, specifically methane bubbling up from flooded paddies, and dangerously depleted water tables. We're basically borrowing from tomorrow to feed today, and that debt is coming due.
So let's diagnose the problem in part 2, understanding market failures. Here is the absolutely crucial concept, the negative externality. When a rice farmer overuses chemical pesticides, the resulting water pollution is a negative externality. Why? Well, because the cleanup cost, or say the financial hit taken by a shrimp farmer downstream whose aquaculture ponds are now polluted, that cost is totally missing from the market price of the rice. The market is failing to send the right price signal. It makes the pesticide look way cheaper to use than it actually is to society as a whole. We all know the environment is an incredibly precious asset, but the way agricultural property rights are set up often creates perverse incentives. It actively encourages degradation. Think about it. If nobody strictly owns the clean water in a river, it almost inevitably becomes a free dumping ground for agricultural runoff. It's the classic tragedy of the commons, playing out in real time. Looking back, you can see how this built up chronologically. Our intense drive for food security during the Green Revolution led to massive yield spikes, which was great, but it required heavily relying on chemical inputs. That naturally led to Phase 3, a massive accumulation of externalities, like dead soil and polluted water. Now, thankfully, we're being forced into Phase 4. This is the necessary sustainable shift, leaning heavily into eco-certification and ESG, that's environmental, social, and governance criteria. Moving right along to part 3, valuing nature's services. This is all about how we price ecosystems. $0. Zero. That is very often the default market price we assign to totally invaluable natural services, whether it's the groundwater pumped out for irrigation or the natural pest control that local biodiversity provides for free. Pricing these critical resources at exactly $0 literally guarantees they'll be overexploited. If it's free, people will overuse it. Period. To fix these market failures, resource economists break valuation down into 3 distinct buckets. First, we've got use value, which is just the direct use of the resource, like catching fish in a river. Then there's option value. That's preserving the resource so we at least have the option to use it later. And finally, non-use value, which is just the benefit of knowing a beautiful, thriving ecosystem exists even if we personally never set foot in it. We absolutely have to account for the total economic value of resources, like the waterways of the Mekong, if we want to build sustainable policies. Now, this sparks a really fascinating philosophical debate. Some folks strongly argue that nature has an intrinsic value, totally separate from human use, that we shouldn't put a price tag on a treat. But the hard reality of modern economics demands a different approach. Slapping a concrete, undeniable economic value on the environment is quite often the single most practical, effective tool we have to actually shift agricultural policy and change how farmers operate on the ground. Which brings us to part 4, climate change and agriculture. The ultimate multiplier effect. Policymakers are facing some truly immense trade-offs here. Think about farming's dual role in this crisis. Agriculture is simultaneously a massive contributor to greenhouse gases. Again, think about all that methane from livestock and flooded rice paddies. But it's also one of the sectors most brutally vulnerable to climate shifts. Just look at the increasing salinity intrusion devastating our coastal farming regions in Vietnam right now.
This perfectly illustrates what we call the global scarcity hypothesis. It shows how surging population growth, combined with climate change, is putting unprecedented, crushing pressure on our finite agricultural resources. We are locked in a fierce competition for land, water, and energy, all while desperately trying to maintain food security in a rapidly warming world. It's a really tight squeeze.
All right, part 5, let's talk solutions, the sustainable shift and circular economy models. We are at a point where a paradigm shift isn't just nice to have, it's mandatory. We've got to ditch this linear, high-emission model that only cares about crop volume. We need to pivot hard to a circular, low-carbon agricultural system. I'm talking about a setup that actively reuses agricultural waste, bakes in low-carbon practices, and rigidly values ESG criteria across global supply chains. That is the future. But how do we actually motivate this shift financially? Well, a brilliant example of a market-correcting policy is the carbon credit system. It works like this. First, you establish baseline emissions. Second, farmers adopt low-carbon practices, like alternate wetting and drying in rice farming, which, by the way, massively slashes methane output. Finally, those emission reductions are verified and then traded on the market. Farmers are literally getting paid cold, hard cash for helping the earth. It's a total game changer. And let's be clear, sustainable farming is just smart business. Look at the data from wildly successful eco-certification programs, like organic Costa Rican coffee. Sustainable agriculture isn't just about hugging trees. By catering to globally conscious consumers, these products command major price premiums. That makes them incredibly profitable and much more economically stable over the long haul. Which brings us to our final section, Part 6, Lessons for Future Leaders. For all of you future economists and business leaders watching, your core task is going to be designing policies and business models that internalize these environmental costs. Listen, if you can figure out how to take a nasty negative externality, like rotting agricultural waste, and transform it into a valuable input for a circular economy, you don't just fix a market failure, you create a massive, highly lucrative market opportunity. That's real innovation. Throughout your careers, I want you to strive for this exact concept: the dynamic, efficient, sustainable yield. It sounds complicated, but it simply means making absolutely sure that our farming practices and resource use today do not steal economic prosperity and environmental health from tomorrow's generations. We have to balance the scales. So, I'm going to leave you with this final thought and challenge. Armed with a deep understanding of natural resource economics, how will you reshape the future of agriculture in Vietnam? The tools to fix the market are sitting right there in your hands. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and I seriously can't wait to see the incredible, sustainable value chains you're going to build out there in the real world.